Hello, and welcome to Starting Points, where one thing leads to another. And here's an example. A few videos back, I shared some passages from Cider with Rosie by Layne. He grew up in England in a large family, and he writes a section in that book sort of as a tribute to his mother's way with growing things. She just seemed to have a feel for that. So here's another example. One thing led to this. This is a book called Lost Paradise. It's by Robert P. for Peter Tristram Coffin, who I read a couple of his poems about haymaking in Maine a couple of videos ago. Now, Peter has reached the age where he's the sixth of 9 children. His older brother by a year and his older sister by 3 years, in that middle triad, are living in town to further their education, and he's gone to join them. And he's never been away from home. And, well, you can imagine his getting used to this new situation. Now, the quiet would reach miles away on every side. That's the farm. Here, people were stirring in the houses next to Peter's. He could hear someone playing a piano and confused talking across the street. It would be hours before they settled down. He was going to miss the still nights on the farm. He would have to live for years hearing people talking and moving like this. A carriage went along the street. Peter tried hard not to listen to it. He tried to hear the wind going quietly through the pines back of the barn. It was no use. His mind ran on this and that. At last, it settled on the tarts. Nobody could make tarts like his mother, or huckleberry pies, or anything else, almost. Up here, away from her, Peter tried to think what a part she'd been in the life he was leaving for good. He hadn't ever thought so hard of her before. He'd always taken her as something always there, like the sun shining up in the morning, or the stars coming up out of the ocean at night. Suppose his mother had not been there at all. What would he have missed? The songs on the melodeon, of course. What else? He would count up and see the sweet peas in the flower bed by the back door, and the smell of them at night when the bees were going home fast like golden bullets. The 3 circles of narcissus up against the dark spruces, they disappeared entirely into the grass the rest of the year. You always forgot them, and they always surprised you each May and came up in 3 perfect circles with white flames at their tops. And the rose bushes, at every turn, all the paths made from the house to the barn and the well. The robin runaway was hers. She'd bought a small root of it from Aunt Sally and set it out in one corner of the yard by the cow pen, and it had run all around the barn like a purple fire and off into the woods. Peter's father said it was a nuisance. It was hard to rake the wisp of hay out of it, which fell from the loads as they came in. But it was pretty, even if it did tear out a rake's tooth now and then. The sunflowers. At every row's end in all the gardens, those were Mother's too. Peter could never remember a garden that hadn't had a clump of sunflowers staring with large brown eyes at both ends of every row. His mother would not have stood for a garden without a wall of sunflowers. They got in the way of the men cultivating. Peter's father growled. The horses nipped at the young stalks when the men turned them around. But if one got torn down, Peter's mother had another seed in its place before nightfall. Every garden was walled with gold all through September, and the bees hummed in a square around you. Mother would not even let you break them down when you dug the potatoes. The winter had a fringe of chickadees around it where the seeds still clung in the drooping sunflower heads. When Peter looked at the sunset, he had 1,000 tall sunflowers beside him looking at it too. And that was his mother's doing. The geraniums, dated by births of calves and of sons and daughters. Lilac, put in the month Richard was born. And bridal wreath the day Richard cut his first tooth. Peter would have to stop counting the flowers his mother had put in, or he'd never get anywhere. But he couldn't leave out the morning glories. Each side of the front doorstep there was a big harp with strings of twine running from shingle nails above to pegs in the ground. The wind played on the harps under Peter's window. He heard them going all night long when the wind was east. They were just harps for a month. Then all at once, one morning, they weren't harps anymore, for green ropes were twisting up along them. One fine day you looked out of your bedroom window and stared down into 3 bowls full of blue sky. Next morning there were a dozen. Blue light came up out of them. You could see it rising when the sun was still touching the eastern lace edge of spruces on Cranberry Horn Hill across the bay. You could see it powder the bobbin of an early hummingbird as he stood still in the air at one of them and wound off the threads of sunlight hidden inside. You looked at them hard, for you knew they'd be gone in an hour of the sun. You thought about the new blossoms that were on their way when you were in bed at night. They were unwinding like clockwork down there. The sun might be right under the bottom of the earth, but they knew just where it was. They had it timed. They could feel it through all that thickness of the world. And the minute its golden edge cut through the spruces, they were on time, wide open and ready to fill up with the low light. When Peter came to think of it, sure enough, there wasn't any part of the farm his mother hadn't a part in. She'd spread the home she had made out of the house to all the 4 winds and the furthest edges of the farm. Peter couldn't think of the space between the back of the tool shed and the orchard without thinking of her, for there was her strawberry bed. She spent as much time there as in her kitchen, with the powder of rhubarb blossoms on her nose and the cherry birds scolding her for keeping them away from the cherries beginning to have red on their cheeks. Well, this account goes on for 6 more pages about things like her cooking, her caring for the sick, her making clothes, making preserves, and oh goodness, the cellar's filled with jars of things that she would put up. And just and largely the care of the honey harvest was in her responsibility. And so he's got a lot that he remembers. And then the next chapter, he remembers things about his father. And I just love the way he, the details and the way he points things out. It's, I found it memorable for me. So thanks for joining me. Until next time, bye for now.